Today, we're diving into something pretty incredible. The first ever podcast interview given by a sitting French president, Emmanuel Macron. And he didn't just record it anywhere. He did it during a state visit to India. What he's laying out here isn't just a bunch of policies. It's kind of like a blueprint for a whole new world order, all seen through the lens of tech, sovereignty, and a really surprising partnership. So let's get right into it.
Right out of the gate, he says this. Talk about a casual self-introduction. It's such a small moment, but it tells you so much. It signals that he's willing to kind of break from the stiff, traditional way of doing things. And as we're about to see, that idea is at the very core of his entire approach to, well, everything, from tech to global politics. It's the perfect place for us to start.
So our first section really digs into this paradox that you can tell just frustrates Macron, France's tech dilemma. He's wrestling with this big question. How on earth did the nation of great scientists, the country that literally gave the world the word entrepreneur, somehow fall from being an inventor to being a follower in the global tech race?
Yeah, this is the central question he's trying to answer. And he argues, this isn't just a French problem, it's a European one. The global tech scene is completely dominated by American and Chinese giants. So Macron offers this really specific three-part diagnosis for why Europe got left in the dust. So his diagnosis really boils down to these three things. First up, a lack of scale. He points out that a startup in France thinks about, a French market, but a startup in the US immediately thinks about a continental market of hundreds of millions of people. Second, capital. And this part is fascinating. He says Europe actually has more savings than the US, but all their regulations push that money into safe stuff like bonds, not high-risk, high-reward tech companies. And finally, it's a cultural thing, an appetite for risk. He basically says Europe needs to become a place where it's okay to fail and then fail again on your way to hitting a home run.
Okay, so that's the problem. But what's the solution? That brings us to our next section, the sovereignty strategy. And this is where his thinking gets really, really interesting. Because to build up France's own independence, his plan is to first swing the doors wide open to global partners.
And yeah, this slide gets right to the heart of what sounds like a huge contradiction, right? Macron just announced this massive 109 billion euro investment in AI and tech. But a huge piece of that funding is coming from the UAE, and the core technology for things like data centers, it's American. So how in the world could that possibly lead to European independence?
Okay, and this slide breaks down his logic perfectly. The old way, he argues, was to just be a customer. You just buy the solutions from the US, which meant sending all your data overseas with zero control. The new way is to get those same partners to build on French soil. This does four huge things. The infrastructure is actually in France. French companies get to use it. It forces a transfer of technology and skills. And, this is the big one, all of it has to follow European data and privacy laws. See? It's not about isolation. It's about control.
So, the AI strategy is really about playing catch-up. But in this next section, we're going to talk about the one area where he believes France doesn't have to follow. It can actually lead. He's making a massive national bet, a moonshot, on the one technology he thinks is going to defy the entire next century.
And that bet, it's all in on quantum computing. When he was asked to name his moonshot for 2035, this was his immediate answer. He sees this as the one field where France can use its unique strengths to get a real, decisive global advantage, what some people call quantum supremacy.
Now, what are we even talking about here? To put it simply, a quantum computer isn't just a faster version of what you've got on your desk. No way. It's a completely different kind of machine. It uses the weird rules of quantum physics to solve problems in things like medicine or creating new materials that are literally impossible for us to solve right now. The country that masters this first is going to have a staggering advantage.
So why is he so confident France can pull this off? Well, he believes the country has this unique mix of ingredients, a deep, historic strength in mathematics, a whole new generation of brilliant engineers coming up, a really thriving ecosystem of startups, and, this ties back to his earlier point, a brand new cultural appetite for taking the huge risks that a moonshot like this requires.
All right, so this is where we zoom out and the picture gets much bigger, because Macron's vision isn't really just about technology. As we're going to see here, his whole tech strategy is actually just one piece of a much larger geopolitical game, trying to forge a third way in a world that's dominated by the US and China. And for him, the partnership with India is the absolute cornerstone of that plan.
And to really get why this third way is so important to him, you just have to listen to how he talks about his, let's say, tense relationship with former President Donald Trump, who is threatening tariffs and sharing their private chats. Macron's response isn't just about being polite, it's about stability. He's saying that when allies can't count on each other to be predictable and respectful, it forces them to go out and build their own independence.
And this all boils down to one key concept: strategic autonomy. It's a phrase you hear a ton from both French and Indian diplomats, and it doesn't mean being anti-American or anti-Chinese. It just means not having to ask for permission. It means having your own military, your own tech, and your own economic muscle to act in your own interest.
And this slide just lays it all out side by side. The old model, over on the left, forces countries into this choice. You're either with Washington or you're with Beijing. The third way that France and India are pushing for is about creating a multipolar world. It's all based on partnerships between independent countries that can work with anyone, but at the end of the day, are dependent on no one.
All right, for this last part, the conversation gets a bit more personal. After laying out this huge strategic vision, Macron gets asked a pretty simple but really profound question. When he looks to the future, what are his biggest hopes and his biggest fears?
So let's start with the fear. I mean, with all the challenges we face, climate change, inequality, all this tech disruption, what does a world leader think is the single biggest threat out there?
His answer is pretty stark. It's the collapse of the rules-based order. He points directly at Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where a permanent member of the UN Security Council just decided to redraw borders with brute force. He's genuinely worried about us going back to a 19th century world where might makes right is the only rule.
But it's not all doom and gloom. On the flip side of that coin, he pointed to a really powerful force that gives him a ton of hope for the future.
His optimism, it all comes down to the youth. He argues that never before in all of human history have we had billions of young people who are so educated, so well-trained, and so connected to each other across the globe. He truly believes this generation has the brains, the energy, and the global awareness to invent solutions to the problems that, frankly, older generations have failed to solve.
And so that leaves us with this one huge critical question. Macron's blueprint, which he's basically co-authoring with partners like India, is a declaration of independence from a world that wants to force a binary choice. It's a bold vision for sure, but in a world of geopolitical giants, you have to wonder, is there really room for a third way to succeed? Thanks for watching.